when I got in here this morning, this was an ice box in here. Nice and cozy now. Say that again? Oh. Do you like playing the xylophones? All right. Let's talk afterwards, all right? All right. So good morning, people. I am very glad you are here. You're going to hear today in the lesson that there is a rhythm to the spiritual life. And it turns out there is a corresponding rhythm to our own spiritual community. We work the circle this way at this time of year. We work the circle that way at that time of year. And this year, that rhythm got disrupted. And the disruption has created an opportunity for us to have reinforced with one another one of our community's core principles. It is the no burnout for our people core principle. We're all aware we had a very disruptive fall. We had this extended challenge of searching for a new home. Then we did find a new home, thank God. And then the moving, and we're still moving. And then Sarah died, and we stopped everything as we should. And we stood with Sarah's family. We stood with one another. So this year, when it came time to get started for how we're going to practice that rhythm that is part of our community's life in the coming year, how we're going to work the circle, where our groups are going to be, when they're going to be, what events are going to happen, when they're going to happen. The organizing folks, the team who gets us organized, was pretty tuckered out. And so when the reminder came up, and then came up again after being snoozed, and then came up again after being snoozed yet again, I sent a note to our planning team. That's the planning team right there. That's Carol, Shelby, Morgan, Sue, Kate, Heather, Jen, and Julie, arranged in that order because that's alphabetical by last name. That's how I grabbed them out of the file. They're the ones who make it happen for us. So I sent them a note and I said, "Dear friends, now is the time when we start getting now is the time we start getting ready for next year. And I am tuckered out. And I know you are also tuckered out. And if we press on and do what's now needed to be done, somebody's going to burn out." So, organizing the spiritual practices for a whole community for the coming year, that is really important. But so is no burnout for our people. So I said in the note, let's just decide that we're going to start 2023 not organized. Let's just decide that we're going to start getting organized in January and put everything behind for at least a month, maybe two. And so here we are in January, starting to get organized. Now, organizing is happening. I've seen the rough draft schedule. It's going to be good. But today, I want to use this as an excuse to reinforce something important that applies to the planning team, but really applies to all of us. Burnout is a big problem. Burnout is perhaps bigger than the problems we create when we leave things undone that we have to leave undone in order to not burn out. So we must be ever vigilant against it. We have things that we should do. We have things that we ought to do. We have things that people expect us to do. We have things that are important for us to do, and not burning out is an essential part of the spiritual life. It's true for the planning team. It's true for me. It's true for you. Now, there are times when you can't but have too much going on. So, you probably will not have noticed the disorganized part of our calendar. Most folks wouldn't have even seen that. But you do know your life. And you do know when ought and when should and when expectations and when important, when those things push you and push you toward an unhealthy balance. So that's why it seemed like a good idea to reinforce this idea. Too much often does get baked into the system. When you've got a teething baby, that is too much. Not getting to sleep through the night is too much. When you've got grandma and she's sick, when you've got a crisis that hits at the job. But even those times, no burnout for our people is an essential part of the spiritual life. Because one of the things that we often fail to honor is recovery time. Our bodies go through a sine curve. They go up and they go down. And here's a stasis right here, and then you'll have a spike of things that are required of you. But what your body will do, if you allow it, is also go into a time that's built for recovery. But what we often do as a society is we go through that, we get to the end of whatever the demand was, the crisis was, and we don't allow ourselves to go into that time. We just spike up again or start living at stasis, and we leave ourselves in deficit. So we've got to learn how to say hard no's in order to recover. I burned out in my 20s. I know of what I speak. And I was doing a lot of stuff, and it was good stuff. It was important stuff. It was people expected stuff. It was should stuff. And I know it takes so long to recover from what we do to ourselves in that kind of a context that it is a bad use of the one life that we get on this earth. So, welcome to Common Thread. And I hope you will find here a rhythm of being a community that is enough to do and enough time to do it. That was it. That wasn't even the sermon. So if you're a newcomer, we're especially glad you're here. We'd like to welcome you in a no-pressure, you-decide-when kind of way. The way we do that is we created a welcome email. If you go to that address, commonthreadchurch.org/newcomer, you will get the email. You can read some stuff about the community. There'll be an invitation at the end to actually meet some real people. You might want to go to your phone right now anyway, because there's going to be our website / a lot of things. Anyway, we hope, newcomer, you'll let us greet us. Let us greet you. I put this one up as well every week to remind us to push against the cultural norm to isolate during our rough times. Healthy community stands with one another in our rough times, but in order to do that, we have to know, and in order to know, we have to ask. So, if you're having rough days, I hope you will help us be that kind of community, the stand with each other in tough times kind of community. Go to our website, again, /soul. We'll connect you with somebody. The email will go to Morgan. Morgan will connect you to somebody who very much wants to stand with you. All right. Let's say it together as we do each week. Are you ready? If you are here, you belong. That was a little cold start. We'll do it again. If you are here, you belong. We are, every one of us, carriers of the inner light. And we are, every one of us, carriers of divine breath. So turn to someone nearby you who is a carrier of the inner light. Say good morning. And while you're doing that, Heather, come on up. You want that? Yes. There's this. There you go.
Okay, good morning again. Time to do some business. As you know, we talk about working the circle at Common Thread. The 4 quadrants: communal, contemplative, serving, learning. What you might not know is that some churches choose to specialize in one of those, so to speak. We call our approach working the circle because we are trying to juggle all 4 as a community. One of the ways that we do that is by getting involved with our community. So we work hard to offer different means to work the circle. Sometimes opportunities to get together in a book group to learn, sometimes opportunities to get together to drink beer for spiritual reasons.
That would be the contemplative, right?
That's the contemplative. So, for example, when you look at this list of ways to connect in the community, I hope that you can see our approach. Today, after the service, of course, the What Are You Thinking? This happens on Zoom at the same time that we're doing it here in the room together. The coffee cart tutorial. The group of people arrive early, which, as you can see, for a community like ours, where half the congregation walks in the door at 10:15, is a really big deal. And they make us coffee and they bring treats. And so, for those of us who like to socialize over food and drink, we need helpers. And so, Carol's team will help you to figure that out. And that means that you have a reason to come early and to hang out in this pretty room with us. We are also having a drop-in Enneagram group today, so that's both a learning opportunity to learn about the Enneagram with Robin, if you don't already know. Robin, would you wave back so everybody can find you if they've never done this before? It's also a chance to get to know people in your community. We are having a virtual workshop on the 28th. There's a little video here. You'll get to hear about that. That is happening on Zoom. But if enough people do that and want to continue it, as you can see, we have this nice big campus now. So it's what are they called? Vision boards. So that's the kind of thing where we could get our start here virtually, but if it's something enough people want to continue, we have ample space downstairs and approximately 3 billion markers in the kids area. So we could easily do that. The chili cook-off and potluck is happening. That is the 5th quadrant, called the eating quadrant. And so there will also be socializing and maybe even some learning. And then, of course, the brew crew, the beer group. I am waiting for someone to start a cocktail crew. If anybody's, okay, done. So yes, Sunday the 29th after the service in the fellowship hall. So this is the chapel. If you go down that hallway over there, you'll discover that we have a fellowship hall, and we're hoping to make more use of it, and we're going to start that by eating chili together. So if you haven't already visited it and you want to kind of get a look at it before you show up on the 29th with your crock pot, just take a walk on down the hall. We have lots of spaces that those of you who don't have kids might not have seen yet. Our clipboard. This replaces the old clipboard we would have passed at one point. These are opportunities to do service within the community. So you can see we have a meal train right now. We have the DIY team. They built that. Carrie, would you wave your hand? Where are you? Carrie, yes. Carrie is, for example, one of the people who built that. So there are other people around, but I can't see them right now. So if it's something you'd like to get involved with, the DIY team, just approach someone and we'll hook you up. You can learn to swing a hammer. And we're going to start a financial stability group. If anybody wants to get involved in that early, sort of a support group. Are we going to get money at this group or just talk about money? I'm not clear yet about that. So yes, the ask is once a week, check the app, check the website, or at the very, very, very least, read the email on Thursday so that you'll know of all these opportunities and how you can work the circle. I have no idea what that means, so I'm going to pass it back over to Doug.
I know what it means. So you heard the clipboard. It's another slash. Go to our website /clipboard. You might want to go there now. On that page, you're going to see one of the posts has that broom image on it. And if you want to respond to any of the things that I'm about to mention in passing, that's where you do it. You would just click on the broom. So the first one is we're going to resume our morning meditation on Zoom at 6:30 a.m. I can open the Zoom on Wednesdays and Fridays pretty consistently, but we could do it more frequently. There are 5 weekdays in the week if others would be willing to open the Zoom. So if you're an early riser and you would like to be part of that, the gig is actually pretty easy. You open the Zoom, you turn on the timer, when the timer is finished, you dismiss people. You get bonus points if you will ask just one simple question, what's coming up in your day that you want to be mindful of, but a lot of people don't stay for that, but that's the whole thing. And if you're interested in that, or you would help with that, you go to /clipboard and then click on the housekeeping one. Also, this year, we have tried a proof of concept idea around music, how we will do music together as a community, this a thing that we've been calling music school. And Joe tells me that we have the potential to create, oh, by the way, we have a proof of concept. We realize this is going to be a great thing for our community. So now we're going to develop it and make it sustainable. And Joe tells me that to create more beauty together, to learn how to do that requires more complexity, and more complexity means more people. So if you play an instrument, if you would go to clipboard/housekeeping. If you're an adult who would sit with some children in a section to help them follow along and do the things that they do, go to clipboard housekeeping. If you would help manage the online group or keep track of resources in an online way, or if you're really good at shopping for used stuff, because we've been borrowing the instruments that we're using right now, and we're going to need to go find them. And they're kind of pricey, but it would be great if we could find them used. So any one of those things, if you go to clipboard/housekeeping. Finally, if you would like to read the book that I keep flogging, Tiny Habits, and you'd like to do it with some other people, go to clipboard/housekeeping. Okay. This morning is Contemplative Sunday. You notice we don't have the kids with us. We try to do that once a month, and then on the 5th Sundays as well. And you will have noticed so far, even in the short meditation that we do before the lesson, that we've been practicing the welcome prayer, or some call the welcoming prayer. It's a practice that we come back to regularly, along with mindfulness meditation, along with self-examination meditation, also called examine in Latin, and loving kindness meditation. And these practices are part of our community's rhythm in order to remind us to use them in our own spiritual practice. So before we begin today, let me tell you a little bit about the welcome prayer. Robin has taught us, when she's teaching us the Enneagram, about personality triads and 3 clusters of personality types, each one more easily captured by one of 3 core lies. And the welcome prayer is the practice of letting go of all 3. First, the lie that captures a third of us, that power and control is even possible. It's not. Or that it will give us what we think it will give us when we chase it compulsively. It won't. Same thing with affirmation and esteem. The core lie that it's attainable, the core lie that it will give us what we want. Same with safety and security, that these are even possible is the core lie, and that they will give us what we believe they will give us if we get them. And yet, the false self latches on to these core lies. In the contemplative tradition, sometimes they're called the energy centers. And we make our attachment to those lies compulsive in the way that they drive us. So we will find ourselves regularly in a moment of afflictive emotion. And if we take that moment and we can deconstruct it and get all the way down to the center of what's going on, we will often find in those afflictive moments, right at the core, one of those 3 lies. And what the welcome prayer does is train us to let go of those compulsive attachments, to let go of one or more of those interior lies. So the prayer itself goes like this. We breathe and then welcome. Much slower than I'm doing it now. I'm showing it to you. We breathe and welcome. We breathe and welcome. And honestly, that's the core of the practice. Many times when I'm practicing the welcome prayer, that's the only part I do. I know that it is an indication of my consent to let go of the energy centers, but I will just breathe, welcome, breathe, and welcome. And then the prayer says, I let go of my compulsive need for power and control. Breathe, and then welcome. I let go of my compulsive need for safety or security. Breathe and welcome. I let go of my compulsive need for affirmation and esteem. Breathe and welcome. And I let go of my compulsive need to change things, because my compulsive need to change things is usually driven by wanting to get the circumstances to line up with one of my core lies. So I let go, I let go, I let go, I let go. Breathe and welcome. Breathe and welcome. And that's the practice. And again, it's a practice for on the go. It's a practice for in the moment. It's not a practice that you sit down at the beginning of the day and do. It's not even a practice that we would necessarily do here. We do it here in this context in order to remind ourselves to use it when the afflictive emotions come. To make it easier to remember, same pattern, simpler words. I let go, power and control. I let go, safety and security. I let go, affirmation and esteem. I let go of my need to change things. So this morning, I will lead us through the prayer, both as a practice, but also to learn it and to remember to use it so that hopefully we will in our daily lives. When the anxiety comes, when the afflictive emotion comes, when we notice that our energy has been hijacked, welcome. Welcome. We don't even have to understand what's going on. We don't have to realize, oh, my power and control energy center has been poked. We don't even have to do that. All we have to do is just consent and breathe welcome. So find a comfortable place there in your body. Take a few breaths. Allow your eyes to drop, your shoulders to drop. Allow your face to go soft. Breathe and relax. Breathe and relax. Breathe and relax. As we begin the prayer, to give it context, picture a time in which you felt an afflictive emotion. Allow to come to mind a time when you were upset or anxious, angry, bothered. And take a moment and let that moment, when your energy had been derailed, let that moment come to your mind. See if you can remember the details. See if you can feel the feelings. And then contextualized by that experience, let's practice the prayer together. Breathe. Welcome. Breathe. Welcome. Continue that pattern for a few moments, breathing in. Welcome on the exhale. And in your mind, follow along with me. I let go of power and control. Breathe and welcome. Breathe. Welcome. I let go of safety and security. And breathe and welcome for a few moments. I let go of my need for affirmation and esteem. Breathe and welcome. And I let go of my compulsive need to change things. A few moments, breathe and welcome. An indwelling divine, less dominated by our ego selves. That's our prayer. Less ruled by the core lies of personality. Less governed by our false selves. That's our prayer. Amen. Well, I hope you'll use this as a practice. Again, it's a practice for on the go. You are probably not like me. I have afflictive emotions from time to time through the day. But if you should, that's the time to practice the welcome prayer. You may want to just snap a picture of the slide just so you remember what they are, because sometimes people forget. Again, it's a prayer for a time when you can't stop and practice mindfulness. It's a prayer for when you're sitting in a meeting and someone says something dumb, or somebody cuts you off while you're driving, or you get off the phone from a phone call. We can always breathe and welcome. We can always, under our breath, let go. Okay, let's begin our lesson this morning. Last week, we looked, as we do at the start of every year, at Psalm 90. Life is short, the psalm says, live it well. Let's look at the mountains for perspective. The psalmist says, they are long, we are short. Our days are like grass. They pop up in the morning dew, and they are gone by the scorching sun of the afternoon. But the mountains, they are here long. They were here long before we arrived. They'll be here long after we're gone. So let's live this short story that is the life that we get on this earth. Let's live it as fantastically as we can. Well, that in a nutshell is Psalm 90. And I said last week that at certain times of the year, Lent is one of them, September when the calendar kind of takes off is another, to a lesser degree Advent for some people, their birthdays, and this time of year, when the turn of the new year comes, at certain times of the year, because our brains excel at drifting, because our brains excel at losing the plot, because our brains excel at drifting from intention and purpose, these times of the year, our wisdom tradition invites us to come back and to consider carefully how we live. Consider intentionally how we live. Last week, we explored how we might use this natural rhythm, not chasing the self-improvement task cycle that often comprises what New Year's resolutions are and has proven to be pretty empty, kind of fruitless for a lot of us, but instead to think about how we might better nurture our souls for the year. The premise being that we are, every one of us, carriers of the inner light, so we have in us already everything that we need to flourish, so let's use this natural rhythm of returning to consider how to nourish what is already in us. And yet again, I told one of our tribal myths, the story of the orange tree. The tree has everything in it that it needs to flourish. All we need to do is nurture what's already there. So if you missed last week, you can catch up on that online. Now, to go along with our lesson this year, you heard a moment earlier that Pearlie's going to be planning a Zoom get-together 2 Saturdays from now. I asked her to do a quick video for us to kind of explain what she's going, and she apologized for the road noise, but you can still hear her. I'll start it again. You know, we practiced this before, and it went seamlessly.
Hello, everyone. I'm traveling down I-10 at the moment, but I wanted to take a moment to tell you about this cool thing we're planning. It's called Let's Get Visual, an online vision board party where we imagine together what we want life to look like in 2023. Vision boards are a great visual tool to help us stay present to what it is that we're calling forth in our lives. You can create a traditional vision board with poster board, magazine clippings, and glue sticks, or you can create a digital vision board using PowerPoint, Canva, Piccollage, or any application you're already comfortable with. So come and join us on Zoom and visualize your future in a safe and supportive environment. That's Saturday, January 28th at noon. See you there.
Pearlie's done this a few times. She's pretty good at it. If you're a visual thinker, Saturday on Zoom, 28th, I think it is. You can find the link to it just about everywhere we put stuff. It's on the website. It's in the app. It'll be in the email coming out. And by the way, thank you, Kate and Jen, who got that all up there for us. Pearlie did say it's going to be limited to about 20 people, so you might want to do that quickly. So these are the questions that we're going to be talking about after the lesson. Give you some time to be thinking. Toward the end of the lesson, I'm going to talk about 3 more soul-nourishing practices than I did at the end of the lesson last week as well. You're going to hear me talk about a rhythm of rest, eating together with other people, learning from a live person instead of Google. And you're going to hear today that the word that we're going to use meant something different in the spiritual tradition, a rule of life. You're going to hear about that. So, have you experienced one of these things? Has it gone well? And have you had a rule in your life, and has that rule moved you forward, or has it held you back? You could be thinking about those while the lesson goes on. So today let's talk about rhythm, a rhythm of soul nurture. And let's go somewhere atypical for inspiration. Let's go to the monasteries. Let's look at the lives of those who, for centuries, have lived in cloistered spiritual communities, dedicating their lives to the rhythm of spiritual nurture, the very thing we're talking about today. Let's look at the lives of monks and nuns. If monks and nuns have mastered anything, it is this rhythm of returning that we've been talking about. If they've mastered anything, it is a strategic approach to being awake while living in brains that tend to put us to sleep. If they've mastered anything, it's a strategic approach to staying on track, living in brains that one of the old songs said are prone to wander. Now, to understand how they mastered this rhythm, we have to think about this guy, Benedict of Nursia. Ben was a monk in Italy in the 400s and the 500s. And what he did as a monk was travel around starting new monasteries. And to help these new cloistered communities, he wrote a book so that they would know what to do, they would know when to do it. And his book was called The Rule of Benedict. And it became a very influential book in Western society, influenced for a long, long time how people lived, less so now. But in Latin, in the 400s, the word rule was less about heavy-handed restrictions, and it was more about the root meaning we hear in the word ruler, a straight piece of wood. It was about keeping things straight. It was about keeping things in order. The keeping things straight of Benedict, the rule of Benedict. A rule was like a trellis for vines to grow on, a way to structure things, and a way to order things so that there would be good outcome. Well, Benedict's trellis, his ruler, his way to order the rhythm of cloistered communities became also, for centuries, a rhythm for all Western Christians. If you like history, you might want to snap a picture of this book. It's a great one. Built into Benedict's rhythm were all 4 quadrants that we call working the circle. Built into Benedict's rule were the communal practices, the contemplative practices, the learning practices, and the serving practices. And you might know that our community, you might not know, when our community organized around this concept that we call working the circle, most of what we drew from came from Benedict. After the fall of Rome, when ancient cultural learning centers were kind of crumbling, when Western society was kind of devolving and decentralizing, and when the institutional church with depressing regularity was falling into corruption, the Irish monks in their cloistered communities gathered around these 4 categories of spiritual practice that we call the circle, and one of those was the learning practices. So they held on to the wisdom of the ancient world. They held on to the documents that held the wisdom of the ancient world. They protected them and they copied them and they wrote them out and they passed them from generation to generation so that later that wisdom that was held in the ancient world could come back and be a gift given to society and become the foundation of the Renaissance and become the foundation of the newly emerging modern era around 1500. It's a good book. You might like it. So, influential, Benedict and his rule. Influential, his trellis, his ruler. But not just influential for monks and for nuns. Back in the days when church bells were a part of village life, the bell was a reminder, usually at 9, usually at noon, usually at 3 in the afternoon, a reminder to pause whatever we were doing for just a moment, to breathe, to perhaps say a breath prayer, usually the Our Father breath prayer, a moment to consider how we live, a moment to consider how spirituality is informing this daily life that I am living right now. The bell was a reminder to consider what is deeper than the more urgent concerns that I am facing right now, to take a moment, take a breath, and remember. Also, in cathedral towns, on the way to work, you could stop by the cathedral for matins. On the way home from work, you could stop by the cathedral for vespers, which were a moment on our way to our days and a moment on our way from our days to consider how we have lived, how we will live. And that rhythm, the bells, the prayers, that was originated with Benedict and his book, The Rule. It was a plan, and it was a plan for nourishing souls. It was a plan, and it was a plan for wandering minds and distracted people. It was a plan for returning. It was a plan that made sure that we nurtured our bodies, made sure that we nurtured our souls, made sure that we nurtured our relationships, made sure that we would feed that which is in us that we already have, that is the source of our thriving and flourishing. Now, you and I, we don't live in the 5th century anymore, and you and I, we don't live in cloistered communities. So for us, the content in the book itself is a little bit less helpful. It's 100 pages long. It's got 73 chapters crammed into those 100 pages, and it outlines a pretty rigorous schedule of what to wear, nothing flashy, when to pray, 8 times a day, where to live, 1 place for your whole life, when to be silent from 8 p.m. until 8 a.m., what to own, nothing, when to fast, all the time, when to be hospitable, always, when to work, when to rest. It was a rhythm that ordinary people can't live, which is why monastics live in cloistered communities, live cloistered lives. But even though the content and the structure of the book itself isn't that helpful, the concept of having a rule for living, a rule to follow for our days, a trellis for our lives to grow on, that is very, very helpful. Which is why we do get organized each year, and why we do get the team together in the late part of the fall to start planning the groups and events for how we'll work the circle to come in the new year. And It's why we do have this rhythm within our community of returning to each one of the quadrants, times in which we invite one another into the 4 categories of practice. The circle builds into our lives the same principles that Benedict organized for the cloistered lives. The circle is a rhythm. It is a pattern. It is a trellis. It is a ruler. It helps us return to intentional living and then to return again and again and again and again, because again, our minds are prone to wander. This morning, as we usually do 2 or 3 times a year, we returned to the welcome prayer, as we'll do for the month of January. We returned at other times to mindfulness practice or examine or loving kindness meditation. You will see when Heather's doing the announcements, there's always an invitation to something communal, some communal practice. A chili cook-off on the 29th, beer or soda on the 5th. There's always an invitation to move through the stages of belonging, to start with public belonging, move to social belonging, move to personal belonging, move to deep belonging. There's always an invitation to serve something that is bigger than ourselves, like this morning, creating space for all of us to meditate together or to sing together, because music makes community. There's One Wake, there's Braver Angels. This year we're going to do with Ridge Road a project, Rise Against Hunger. You might have heard the organization. We're going to work on that together. Working the circle is a rule. It is a ruler. It is a trellis. It is a pattern that helps us build lives that in the long run we want. And being part of a community that has a rhythm helps us return to relationships that nurture us, to quietness and silence that nurtures us, to serving and selflessness that nurtures us, helps us return to the trellis on which we want our lives to grow. So the invitation of the circle is an invitation to build a circle of living. Now, here's the thing. Everybody already has a rule for life. And everybody's rule is already working. It is taking us where it takes us, because our routines are the trellises that do determine where our lives grow. The thing that's different about what we're talking about this morning, the invitation of the spiritual life, the invitation of intentional living, is to asking ourselves in a recurring way, is the rule that I am currently living the rule that I want to be living? Is this rule nourishing my deepest self? Is this rule directing our growth where we want our growth to go? And again, this time of year, our cultural norms actually encourage us to revisit the rule we are currently living. I'm doing that in my own life right now. I hope you'll do it with me. I mentioned last week, my life, like yours, has faced 3 years of imposed externalities that have been a great big distraction. The pandemic, the search for a new home, being crowded out of our old home, moving, still moving. But this year, I feel settled enough that I've started to feel like I'm waking up. And I started to remember, oh yeah, I do have a rhythm of returning. Oh yeah, I do these things. I've done them for years, but I've neglected them. And the one that I've neglected most has been silence. I've had in the past a weekly and a quarterly and an annual rhythm of silence. So I'm building that back into my rule. My focus this year is silence, but your focus might be something different. When you imagine the 4 categories of practice that makes up the circle, what does your soul need? What would be nurturing to you right now? And the invitation of these moments in time are to ask ourselves, what do I need now? What will nourish my soul now? Communal, contemplative, learning, serving. Last week, I suggested 3 things to consider: more carefully curate our scrolling, create more silent spaces, schedule an encouraging contact. practices that can inform the trellis on which our lives grow. Less self-improvement task, more soul-nurturing rhythm. I also suggested odds are one of these is not the one for you. They were, and the few more that I'm going to suggest later in a moment, they are less a thing you should do and more an invitation for us to be asking, what should I do? If not this, then what? What will be the thing that will be nurturing my soul? What will be the development of a here, now, small, doable thing that is the rhythm of this time of life? It's an invitation to listen for the interior nudges that come if we are quiet. That one, we will hear the inner voice say. That one will awaken you to the inner light that you carry. That one is for you. That one is for now. So today, I'm going to make a few more suggestions. Like last week, odds are not the one for you, but maybe. But if not this one, may trigger your thinking about the other thing. What shall our rule be this year? You might consider building into the rhythm of your life, eating with other people. Over the last 60 to 70 years, technology and lifestyle have fundamentally upended a very core evolutionary human practice that is a gazillion years old. The core practice of human well-being of eating together. Eating with our people, but in the ancient practice of hospitality, going out of our way to eat with the stranger as well. Eating together is a bonding experience. Eating together is a unifying experience. Eating together is a community-making experience. Eating together lowers our defenses, makes it easier to listen, makes it easier to change perspective, to see what we haven't seen, and we don't do it as much as we used to. Eating together is a deeply human practice. It sets aside time for doing to emphasize instead time for togethering. And because we don't do it as much anymore, we are collectively, culturally impoverished. It's quite possible that a rule for living might be scheduling time for eating with others, maybe with loved ones, maybe with emerging friendships, maybe at home, maybe a packed lunch in the park sitting at a picnic table. This year, several in the community are thinking about how we could eat more. You heard about that a little earlier. We've got this fellowship hall. We've got this courtyard now. How might we create spaces for this deep human practice? And maybe it would be a rule for your life this year. The most ancient of ancient wisdom tells us to set aside a day each week to not work. Now, in earlier times than the one we live in, that rest day was a socially agreed upon rhythm of stopping, a socially agreed upon rhythm of resting, a socially agreed upon rhythm of delighting, a time to gather with those that we love and to not be hurried because there was nowhere else to go anyway. But it's very difficult to practice a day of rest, a rhythm of resting, when it is not a culturally agreed upon time. Because those that we would spend time with would be doing perhaps work on that day, or would have other things to do or other places to go. So it's hard to practice not doing when we don't all practice not doing together. So it may not be possible to implement the idea of a rest day and to impose it upon those who are in your circle, those who you would like to practice your rhythm of rest with. But if you can, by all means do. If you can create a space and all agree on it together, great. But if not, we return to our core principle of doing things. Come on, tell me what it is. Not the right order, but you got the right words. Here, now, small, doable. That's right. We start here, now, small, doable. We put the tiny into tiny habits. I talked to Denise a couple days ago. We were just thinking about this. We're thinking about the possibility of making Sunday afternoons a no-screen time slot in our house, except for the e-ink Kindles, because we don't read paper books anymore. It's going to be an adjustment to not watch something on late afternoon Sundays, because that's been our habit. But I did start looking around at my week, and I looked at the time slots that I have, and I realized that's probably going to be the best bet. We do have a fireplace we can sit by when it's cold. We do have a porch we can sit on when it's warm. We could talk. I do like cooking. I could actually make a plan for a meal. We could have sex on Sunday afternoons. We could have our kids over more often, preferably not at the same time. Seems like we could make our Sunday afternoons more intentionally restful, more soul nurturing, more a trellis that would direct our soul's nurture and growth. Now, for years, I did not rest on Sunday afternoons. The church that I worked at was all day for Jesus. They actually said that, all day for Jesus. So when our kids were young, we protected Mondays. Now, since everybody on the same schedule isn't really possible, it seems less important when we practiced rest than that we practiced rest. So maybe that for you, setting aside a time for what used to be called the Sabbath, a rhythm of rest. Another thing that Robin has taught us through the years, as she has taught us the Enneagram, is how well served we are when we borrow insight from the other personality types. For example, some people, it is as easy as can be to extend grace to knuckleheads. It is as easy as can be to extend understanding to people who are misbehaving. In fact, that personality has to learn to not extend grace. That personality has to learn to set boundaries and to insist on those boundaries, and has to learn how to insist on being respected. But for the other personalities, when we see that natural capacity for grace, we can look and say, that ability to be patient and forgiving that way, I did not even realize that was an option. I did not realize that was one of the ways that we could go. Not getting even is a possibility. Wait a minute. So, one of the ways that we could nurture our souls this year is to create a regular reminder of learning from others. So maybe you know someone who manages their finances well, or maybe you know someone who takes care of their body well, or someone who handles relationships well, or someone who raises children well, or someone who manages time or runs projects well. We've learned to default to Google. We've learned as Americans to do it on our own. We've learned how to handle things on our own, and thankfully we've got a lot of great resources to do that. I love being able to Google stuff. But we didn't evolve in a Google environment. We evolved in tribes. And we spent time learning eye to eye and heart to heart with flesh and blood human beings. People who in the process could see things through with us and watch us and challenge us and celebrate us, doing that with friends and with family and within a spiritual community. Now that is a rare commodity because we have learned to fragment as a society. We don't know how to do that, which is why we revisit this process and consider making it part of the rule, the ruler, the trellis of our lives, to be more up close and personal in our learning. It's a primal approach. So maybe this year you just set a tickler file to remember. Ask somebody. Set a tickler file to remind you so that when the moment comes up, learn from somebody. I started this practice when I was in my 20s, and it was awkward. It felt a little bit embarrassing. It felt like I was horning my way in on other people's time, like I was somehow imposing on them. Or, on the other hand, it also felt like I was weak or I was needy. Now that I've practiced this for 40 years, that was silly. I know it now. First, even if I was horning my way in on someone else's time, it was so worth it. Because the stuff that I have learned from other people, well worth any kind of inconvenience I caused them. But the thing is, it's not been that, not even a bit. Remember I said a moment ago, we evolved in tribes. So it is just as human to give insight as it is to ask for it. And for 40 years of doing this, intentionally at first, now I do it without even thinking about it, not once has ever anyone looked at me sideways. Not once has anyone ever indicated that I was weak or needy because I was asking them to teach me something. Not once. Now, to be fair, I tend not to hang around with assholes. I tend to hang around with pretty emotionally intelligent people, so my results may be skewed, but it is a deep part of our human wiring to learn from one another. Person to person is better than Google. So, curate our scrolling, create more silent spaces, schedule encouragement, eating with others, a rhythm of rest, learning from others. May it be that we are people of renewal. Indwelling divine, may we become and be becoming people of wisdom. May we be growing on a trellis that is taking us where we want our destinies to be. Amen. All right, so let's get out our phones. We all give online now. The donate button is at the top of the website, commonthreadchurch.org. Lots of options, easy ways to give. If you're here in Raleigh, or if you all are joining us remotely, we invite you all to take an ownership stake in the community. Right now, our monies are helping us occupy this new space. Later this year, our monies are going to be focused on developing our children and our teens groups. And remember what I always say, there is good return when we invest in community. We give our time and our energy and our love and our dollars, and the community takes those resources, amplifies them, and gives them back to us in the form of an environment in which we thrive and flourish and grow. So we all give online on our website now. It's about as easy as can be. Please do that. Now in a minute, we're going to dismiss you all on the live stream. And here in the room, we're going to do What Are You Thinking? Now, if you're online and maybe you haven't visited us before, you may not know that this is one of the best parts of our community life. Now, I love teaching. I love curating content, and I love finding the most wise wisdom I can find, and I love that I get to do most of the lessons for our community. But I've done it a long time now, and here's what I know. I know that very little of the growth that happens in people's lives happens because I stand up and say words. The processing of the words, boy, that's where the life is. And doing that processing alongside other people, that's where the life is. So here's the thing. Here in the room, participation is easy. All we've got to do is not walk out. In a moment, we'll stand up and form groups. You have the option to walk out. I hope you don't. But it's much harder for you out there watching online because you face a barrier to participation. You have to click a link. You have to join a Zoom, and you don't know if those people are going to like you or not like you. You're going to know if you don't know any of that stuff. But that link is in the YouTube notes, and it's also on the front page of our website. And if you, and remember the password, it's going to be 1417. Here's the thing. We can invite you to this, but it's going to be harder for you. But again, it's about the best thing that we do in our community. We found it so worth working through the resistance. So we hope you will. Link is in the YouTube notes there. It's in the, on the front page of the website. Again, the password 1417. And I know Scott is waiting for you. And Scott told me to say what I just said. He would really like you to join him on the Zoom. All right, let's dismiss the folks online. If you would, put your hand on your heart, and let's remember as we go together that we are, every one of us, carriers of the indwelling divine. We carry love and joy and peace, patience, kindness, goodness. It's all in us because we carry the breath of God within us. And if you would extend your other hand to our city, let's look for opportunities to share what's already in us with the people that we live and work and go to school with, looking for opportunities to repair and heal our worlds. Amen. God bless you all. Please head over to the Zoom. Those of us in the room, here's what we're going to do.